Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's Friday here and around the nation. And, well, of course, it's Friday in other places too, but nonetheless, we're here. Got a lot of great stories, so stick around for the next hour as we go and talk about those. Got a lot of important issues to talk about, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's back. You're never going to believe, or maybe you will, who's trying to bring it back. Then we've got another effect of the Trump tax cuts. Money flowing into foreign governments. Or foreign investors. Then we're going to talk about how some companies are worried about curing diseases. They're worried about curing diseases and what kind of impact it will have on their bottom line. It's a gross story. Gross story. Then we've got a story about a study. I think you're going to like this. About the Democratic electorate and how progressive they are, despite politicians, of course, being unbearably centrist. So we'll talk about that. That new study, co-done by the Justice Democrats. Great study here. And then finally, we're going to talk about Cynthia Nixon and how she is challenging Governor Andrew Cuomo. You're going to love that. It's a great story. Okay. First, before I get into the show, I do want to wish a happy birthday to somebody that I just found out. Pat Hacker in the chat. Happy birthday. Hopefully you have a good, fantastic day. Lots of cake, all that stuff, if you like cake. I love cake, and that, of course, has gotten me into trouble many, many times. Okay. So, anyway, hopefully you have a happy birthday. Let's see. Before I get into the rest of the stories, I want to remind everybody, please give us a like and a share. That helps out the show. Other things that help with the show is Patreon, of course, and using the Super Chat in order to send messages. So that helps the show and it allows me to read your messages. So before I get into the main prepared stories, I do want to talk a little bit about something that President Trump did today. So earlier today, President Trump decided to pardon one of aides to Vice President Dick Cheney. That is Scooter Libby, Louis Scooter Libby. That's what he's called, Scooter. Boy, am I messing this up already. So he used to be Cheney's chief of staff and had been convicted of lying to investigators and obstruction of justice following the 2003 leak of the identity of a CIA operative named Valerie Plame. Now, look, Trump is like, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to pardon you, even though you lied to, again, the FBI. You helped bring us into a disastrous war with Iraq that led to tens of thousands of innocent people getting killed. As well as our service members, as well as spending so much money in that country to begin with on war. Now, George W. Bush, of course, is beyond pleased. He's very pleased for Scooter and his family. The irony here is that earlier today, Donald Trump came up against Comey. And he's like, what a leaker. What a terrible person. But wait a minute. Scooter Libby leaked the identity of an undercover agent. And he lied to investigators. Isn't it ironic that you're calling out Comey? Which, look, I'm not a friend of Comey. He's not my Comey. He's got his own problems. But isn't it hypocritical that you call somebody a liar and a leaker, and then you go and on the same day you pardon a liar and a leaker? He has no morals. He has no center. He has no core. Trump said in a statement that, well, he didn't know Libby, but for, quote, years I've heard that he had been treated unfairly. Now, I got a thought about this, right? So, you know who he's been hearing that from? Fox News. You know, he's been hearing that from all the neocons, the Bush era neocons that he has surrounded himself with. That's who he's hearing that from. Oh man, that Scooter Libby, he got paid. He really got treated so unfairly in that whole deal. Oh really? Oh. I guess I could pardon him then. And that's how it works. He doesn't know anything about anything. He's full of hypocrisy. But unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with in the era of Trump. So, full-on hypocrisy. Okay. Frustrating. It's very frustrating. All right, let's move on. Let's go to our stories. It's back. It looks like the TPP might be resurrected by Donald Trump. Here we go again. According to the Washington Post, President Trump has now ordered top administration officials on Thursday to look at rejoining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As of course, the gigantic deal that would have given corporate control over a lot of our trade. It was actually going to be a terrible deal for American workers. So, look, Bernie Sanders, later on Hillary Clinton, and a lot of Democrats and also union members were massively against this deal. It's going to erode American jobs. Basically, what we're going to see is we're going to see all these American jobs now going into these low-wage countries and these corporations outsourcing this labor. Now, President Trump, I think, did the right thing in originally killing TPP. And I actually gave him credit for it. I said, great. This is great. Look, this trade deal, the way that it's set up, and the way that, I guess, I don't know if the arbitration is the correct word for it, these disputes between corporations and nation states that could be decided by corporate lawyers. I mean, that was a really shady proposition. And definitely wouldn't work out for taxpayers, also wouldn't work out for American workers, but it'd be great for corporations. So that's why I opposed the deal. And Donald Trump claimed that he was on the side of the American worker when he said, okay, let's kill TPP, let's pull out of it. Well, unfortunately, like a lot of things that he promised, a complete 360. Trump apparently gave new orders to U.S. Trade Representative Robert E. Lighthizer and National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow during a White House meeting with lawmakers and governors, according to several GOP senators in attendance. Now, one of them was Senator John Thune. Now, look, Kudlow, of course, new economic advisor, taking over for Gary Cohn, and he is a free trader. He thinks unfettered free trade is awesome. So naturally, he loves TPP. He loves trade deals. He does not like the tariffs against China, all that stuff. And look, he's been likely whispering in Donald Trump's ear about this, right? So Trump, according to John Thune, then told Lighthizer and Kudlow to take a look at getting us back into that agreement on our terms, of course. Thune said, quote, he was quite bullish about that. What would those terms be? I don't know. And how would they impact American jobs? We don't know. We don't have any details, right? But the problem that I have with free trade is that, look, what it leads to is, unfortunately, unfettered free trade leads to outsourcing, and it leads to a race to the bottom when it comes to wages and benefits. Again, there's a reason that all these corporations go to Vietnam and China. It's because they have incredibly low wages and no worker protections. And of course, corporations then can make the argument for, jobs that are still in the United States. Hey man, look, if you don't allow us to lower your wages and give you less benefits or no benefits, then we're just going to have to go somewhere else because we can't afford it. But in reality, they can't afford it. But what they're doing, of course, is trying to pad the bottom lines of their executives, their CEOs, and their shareholders because, look, corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit. And if they are in a system where it is more profitable to go to a low-wage country with no regulations that allow you to pollute everywhere and treat workers like crap, then that's where they're going to go. That's where they're going to go. Corporations, I'm sorry, I hate when they use the term American corporations because there's nothing American about them. They're multinational corporations, and they absolutely have no loyalty. They're not patriotic human beings. They're not human beings at all. They're legal fictions. They're machines. They don't actually exist. They're not people. They have no speech rights. They have no emotions. They have no feelings. They're only there to make profit. So why would we allow them then, and why would we write rules that would allow them to do things that hurt people? And look, talk about the American worker, right? But also those people in Vietnam, they're being exploited for low wages. We should also work to boost them up as well, their wages, make sure that they have adequate worker protections. Again, this is a system of exploitation. And unfortunately, again, free trade leads to that race to the bottom. Now, I don't know how he would address that, saying he wants to do it on his terms that are more favorable to the United States and the United States worker. Okay, how would he do that? We don't know. And look, I'm worried because Donald Trump, he's not a smart person, okay? He's not smart, and he doesn't really care about regular working people. And by the way, let's not discount the fact that this could be an absolute distraction from all the other crazy shit going on in the news right now that is not very pleasant for President Trump right now. In fact, let me go to this. His comments were so unexpected that White House officials, lawmakers, business groups, and others weren't sure whether Trump had made a calculated overture or if it was another whimsical idea that he could soon cool on. I'm betting on whimsical if those are the choices, right? Now, I think it's hilarious that the press still believes that he makes calculated moves. No. There's nothing calculated about President Trump. He's an imbecile. And he basically reacts on whatever he sees and hears immediately without knowing the facts. He listens to whoever strokes his ego. And by the way, this is usually Fox News or people on Fox News. And again, look who he surrounds himself with. These are all Bush-era, free market, neoliberalism, or neoliberal, people that are pushing these policies. Now, let me tell you why I think that he actually got out of the TPP. Again, it was really popular, for one. Getting out of the TPP, staying out of the TPP, very popular. Again, Bernie Sanders, guy that brought this up, and was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that because it's a danger to American workers. That proved to be very popular, more popular than the TPP was under President Obama. And look, a lot of people caught on and was like, hey, yeah, you're right. This is NAFTA all over again. We got screwed. We got shafted when it came to NAFTA. So here comes Donald Trump saying, well, that's popular. That plays well. Okay, I'm against TPP. Another reason that he was probably against TPP, because it was Obama. It was Obama's trade deal. Obama trade. Anything President Obama had done, good or bad, he's got to be against it. 100%. Because his base eats it up. Oh, if I'm against Obama 100%, well then, my base, they're going to love it. And plus, I don't like Obama. And he never has. So there's that. There's what I think. Now, a senior administration official, going back to the Washington Post here, speaking on the condition of anonymity to describe the White House's internal approach, said Trump has not set any goals or deadlines for Kudlow and Lighthizer for when a new agreement should be reached. Instead, they say the White House is approaching potential new talks as a way to signal that Trump is receptive to free market proposals if he feels they can be reached in a way that advances U.S. interests. Now, what kind of interests actually appeal to President Trump? His own financial interests. And to go back to that, him and his family, right? in the recent tariffs, guess who was exempted? Guess who there was a carve-out and a deal for? Ivanka Trump and her business. You don't think that he's going to do something that's going to massively benefit the Trump empire? Of course he is, and you don't know Donald Trump at all. Look, I've got another quote here. He wrote, "Would only join TPP if the deal were substantially better than the deal offered by President Obama." Again, if it's Obama did it, well, obviously he's stupid and his deal was terrible for us, but don't worry, I can get a better deal. Quote, "We already have bilateral deals with 6 of the 11 nations in TPP, and are working to make a deal with the biggest of those nations, Japan, who has hit us hard on trade for years." Look, President Trump, before he was president, he was always talking about, the Japanese, they're out trading us. Okay, man. But look, do you think he even understands anything about trade, actual trade? No, he doesn't. Look, he doesn't understand that, and I'll give you an example here. When he was meeting with Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, look, man, he didn't understand that he couldn't just enter into bilateral trade agreements with Germany. Germany is part of the European Union, and the European Union stipulates that you can't just trade with a specific member nation. You have to trade with all of them. Every member nation. It's 27 different countries that are part of the European Union. And he's like, yeah, but I want a trade deal with Germany. Germany, can it be bilateral? And at some point she was just like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's bad. Great. Yes, you can trade with us, except that you have to trade with the EU. She just nodded her head because she's like, well, I'm not going to go and correct him because, diplomatic relations and all. But there was look, this was an exchange that Trump's aides said was humiliating. So do you think this person understands the nuances of trade? I don't think he does. He's not a very stable genius. He does not have a good brain. Okay. But here's the thing. On trade, we know what we want. We want fair trade, not free trade. We want trade that is mutually beneficial for everybody, for American workers, and people in other countries as well. Again, fair trade, not free trade. We want a system where jobs don't flow to these low-wage, low-regulation countries and continue the global race to the bottom, which we have seen. And unfortunately, that seems to have happened under NAFTA. Now, I'm not saying that Trump's trade wars are the answer either. There's a mix of some protectionism, of course, that doesn't just, of course, benefit Trump's businesses or any sort of a deal benefiting Trump's business. But there needs to be measured, careful policy so that you don't end up wrecking the economy. And unfortunately, what we're getting with Trump is no nuance, just ham-handed flailing. But that's, of course, how Donald Trump handles everything. And now, apparently, as I said before, it is very likely that we will see some version of the TPP that has returned, but, of course, with special carve-outs and benefits to Trump and his family. Because, of course. Okay. Now, you all remember how Donald Trump and the Republicans said that their tax cuts were going to be absolutely amazing for the economy and for the American worker? Well, here's another reason why that was a complete lie. According to a new report from the Congressional Budget Office, most of the economic growth from the Trump tax cuts is not going back into the American people's pockets. It's not trickling down. In fact, it's going overseas, right out of America. Now, the report found significant differences between projected GDP, which measures the level of production in the United States, and the gross national product, which measures the income earned by all Americans. If the economic impact from GDP is higher than GNP, the differences between the two is income generated in the United States, but going to foreigners. So understand what that means. So this is income and wealth that's created in the United States by American workers, but guess what? The fruits of that labor are flowing out of the United States. That wealth, that income generation is going somewhere else, to China or India or the UK, Europe, wherever. It's not staying in America. That wealth is not going to us. Now, according to the CBO, that on average, 34% of income from the economic activity driven by the tax cuts right now is flowing out of the country. However, in 2028, when the full effects of the tax cuts are in place, that number increases to 80%. 80% of the economic activity created by the tax cuts that Donald Trump and the Republicans signed are going to go right out of the United States. It's not coming back to you. It's going into the hands of the rich, and it's coming right out of America. Worse off, the effects of those tax cuts, by the way, is not just income and wealth generation going out of the country, also income and wealth generation going right to the rich. And you will end up having to pay for it. Now, you see, what rich people and giant multinational corporations, what they don't pay in taxes, you end up making up, either in higher taxes on things like, for example, consumption, gas taxes, different governmental fees, etc. Got to pay for things, right? I mean, that's the conventional wisdom. You got to have money to pay for things. Well, where are we going to get the money from? Either you run a gigantic deficit, in which the tax cuts, by the way, CBO also scored the tax cuts as adding $1.9 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. And look, this is disastrous, okay? Yes, you're going to pay for this in the end. And look, the other way that you pay for it, not only through, increased taxes on yourself, the middle class, state and local taxes, because, again, they're not going to raise it federally until these tax cuts for the middle class expire, when they do in 2028. States will run out of revenue. They'll get less revenue from the government. They're going to have to find the taxes somehow. They're going to have to fund things somehow. And that's going to come right out of your pocket. Now, the other way, of course, they'll get this from you is in reduced government programs. Now, that's unfortunately already what the tax cuts are leading to. Yesterday, I did a story about Donald Trump ordering a review of all of our different safety net programs to see what they can cut. Well, I mean, we passed this gigantic tax cut bill. Now, we're going to say we don't have any money, and we're going to go and cut welfare. We're going to cut food stamps. We're going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We're going to cut low-income housing for the poor. That's the entire plan put forward by the Republicans. And now they're going to say, look at those debts and deficits. I guess we're just going to have to cut your health care. Sorry. And it's not just programs that help the poor. It's programs that actually also help the middle class. These tax cuts, you don't understand, these are the greatest theft in history from the poor and the middle class. This is income redistribution from the poor and the middle class to the very rich. 83% of these tax cuts, the benefit, goes to the wealthy, not to you. Now, I got a quote here from Senator Chris Van Hollen. Now, he told Newsweek, quote, "We heard statement after statement about how this tax plan would be great for American workers, but the analysts are clear. When this thing kicks in, 80 cents of every dollar gained from the tax plan will go to foreigners and not American workers. That is a stunning number. Stunning, yes, but you know what? It's something that maybe we weren't completely warning about, but another negative economic impact of these gigantic tax cuts. Now, there's more information about how exactly foreign investors will benefit from this. Now, Newsweek explains that nearly 1/3 of the U.S. stock market is owned by foreign investors, which means that they end up benefiting from the $238 billion increase in stock buyback authorizations that happened since the tax law had passed. So all these foreign investors will go and invest in American corporations through the stock market. And look, when these tax cuts passed, one of the impacts of this was increased stock buybacks. Now, that is something that we warned about. We said, look, this money, this is not going to trickle down. It's not going to go and create more jobs. It's not going to go to creating more wages or raising wages. What they're going to do is that they're going to use this money to buy back their own stock. That's it. That's what they're going to do. And of course, they're like, no. Republicans are like, no, of course not. No. They're going to use this. They're going to create jobs. They're going to ignite the economic engine of of America, of the working class. And then everybody's going to be fantastic. No, they $238 billion in stock buybacks. That's the impact of the tax cuts. And of course, these foreign investors, well, since they're investors, right? Well, they get their return on investment. I guess it turns out that if you invest in American corporations, you're going to do fantastic under this system because it is a system of greed. And it is a system of corruption. They bought our politicians. They bought the Republican Party. Donald Trump was corrupt to begin with. And he went to the top to try to, he claimed that he was going to fight that corruption. And that's why people elected him. But he is the corruption. Or a great, great example of that corruption that has been in our system before. He is not the corrupter, he is part of the corrupted. But anyway, an analysis of Fortune 500 companies found that corporations have spent 37 times more on stock buybacks than on Americans' workers' bonuses and wages. Again, no surprise. We said that that's exactly what was going to happen. They're not going to invest in your wages because they don't need to. They're not going to invest in more jobs because they don't need to. Demand drives the economy, not supply. Corporations, I'm sorry, they do not drive the economy. It is consumer spending that drives the economy. When consumers don't have money, they don't spend as much. And when they don't spend as much, there's not as many jobs. And of course, you don't create jobs, then there is a permanent unemployed underclass of people. That's how this system works. But anyway, Van Hollen continues. He says, quote, Republicans had fair warning that a huge chunk of this economic boost would flow to foreigners. The bottom line is that foreigners own a large chunk of U.S. corporations and will get a windfall. But look, they don't care. They don't care. They sold you a lie. 83% of the benefits of the tax cuts went to the rich. 80% of the benefits now will also flow out into these foreign investors. They took all that money that could have been used for something else and gave it to the rich. Now, Van Hollen also said, quote, Republicans have clearly abandoned any claims of fiscal responsibility. You're borrowing close to $2 trillion from our kids and grandkids, and then you're giving it to corporations and others at the end of the day. 80% of the benefits and additional economic activity are going to foreigners. But see, there's a couple of things wrong with that, actually. For one, Republicans have never been fiscally responsible. Republicans are the Santa Claus for the rich. They give out gifts. Look, they want to accuse the Democrats of giving out gifts to their, to their voters. Yeah, things like, I don't know, fairer wages and benefits for when people can't find work and things like that, so that they can actually survive. Oh, this is Democrats just giving out gifts, giving out gifts. Yeah, but then the Republicans give out gifts to the rich and to military defense contractors and corporations. So, look, they can't claim that they're fiscally responsible, okay, when they just pass gigantic tax cuts for the rich. And then, of course, it's funny because whenever Democrats get into power, they howl and scream and cry about the debt. Oh, $20 trillion in debt. Oh, my God, Obama. You know, Obama lowered the deficit. Not the same as the debt, obviously. But look, he lowered the deficit because, look, here's the thing. Deficit reduction actually is pretty unpopular. You ask the American people. Most American people are like, yeah, I'm not really worried about that we have a debt and deficit problem. No, I'm worried about jobs. I'm worried about healthcare. I'm worried about how I'm going to pay for my kids' college. I'm worried about that stuff. I'm not worried about that. But if you ask people that are in Washington, you ask some of the pundits and you ask people on, on Wall Street, they're the ones that are really, really worried about the debt. Those are the deficit hawks, right? Now, here's the thing. Most of the politicians in Washington listen to those people. So they're like, oh, we got to do something about the debt and deficit. It's so big. It's so big. We gotta handle it. We're borrowing from our kids. No. That's why Democrats lose in elections. Because they subscribe to the fiscal conservatism that the Republicans claim that they represent. I mean, and there's a reason for that. If we're all worried about debts and deficits, which a majority of the American people are not, but the politicians are, well, then we can't enact things like single payer. Then we can't do free college. Then we can't do other policies that are incredibly popular with the American people. I'm sorry, we can't do it. Debts and deficits, man. Why? It's because Republicans and centrist corporate Democrats have convinced everybody that we just don't have the money. We just don't have the money. But wait a minute. We do have money. We're our own sovereign fiat currency. we control how much money we have. And so we can create and destroy our own money. In fact, that's what taxes are. Taxes just eliminates money out of the system. But, and that explains, by the way, that we can have money for tax cuts for the rich and for all the wars that we could ever have, that we could ever want. That's why. Because they know this already. This is a big lie that the Republicans have been selling us since at least the 30s. That you can cut taxes on the rich, that you can spend money on war, but you can't do social programs because we just don't have the money. It's too expensive. No, we can do it. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't rein in the bloated military. No, that's absolutely what we should do. We spend too much of our resources on the military. And look, we should tax the rich. Of course we should tax the rich. Not to pay for things, but to tax that money out of existence. Because right now, we have record levels of income inequality. That hurts the economy. That even hurts the rich. All that money should not exist at the top. There should be a little bit more of an even or equal distribution of that money. Don't buy the lie. Don't buy the bullshit. From both neoliberals and conservatives. We can do these things. And we will if we elect real progressives. If you keep on electing corporate Democrats and Republicans, you're going to continue to see all of your benefits, all of your money end up going to the hands of the rich and multinational corporations. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break here. Don't worry, we got more stories for you after this. But first, I'm going to take a break. We'll be right back in a minute. Hey everybody, back and around the nation here. I want to read a super chat here from Platypi, who says, don't spend it all in one place. You know, funny how you bring that up, because today I just made one of my last student loan payments for a student a loan that I had over 10 years ago. So, like, that hurt. That was a lot of money. But that's taken care of at least. I just have more student loans to go. So that's not the only one that I have. But hey, at least I got one knocked out. So thank you. That's pretty much where a lot of my money goes. Rent, bills, and student loans. So, but thank you. I appreciate that. And of course, the rest of it goes into doing the show. Okay. Anyway, so let's get into our next story here. Oh, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share as well. Noticed a couple of people that, don't exactly like the show. Hey man, you like the show? You don't like the show? Whatever. Let me know. You know, if I can do better, that's always something that I'm looking to do. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about Goldman Sachs. Now, recently, a Goldman Sachs analyst had asked a question that sounds, that basically points out how our system is geared towards not healthcare, not taking care of people, not solving illnesses and coming up with cures, but with making giant corporations a lot of money. Now, the specific question was asked in the context of gene therapy. Now, gene therapy, of course, if you're unfamiliar, promises cures to many genetic disorders, things like hemophilia, blindness, and acquired diseases like Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, and even cancer or certain forms of cancer. So look, these are devastating and debilitating diseases in which a lot of them are involve expensive, lifelong treatments, but no known cures. Now, gene therapy could possibly change that and end these terrible afflictions. Now, that would be great for humanity. However, it would apparently be bad for business. According to CNBC, Goldman Sachs analyst Salveen Richter had written a note to clients earlier this week asking, is curing patients a sustainable business model? Now think about that. Just think about how that question sounds. Is coming up with cures, to make people's lives better, obviously, and actually save their lives in a lot of circumstances, sustainable when it comes to business? Is it a good business model? Well, no. If you're only worried about profit, well, then of course you're not going to want to cure a disease because that is your profit center. And he goes on to point that out. He says the potential to deliver one-shot cures is one of the most attractive prospects of gene therapy, genetically engineered cell therapy, and gene editing. And that is true. However, such treatments offer a very different outlook with regard to recurring revenue versus chronic therapies, meaning that this is medication that you stay on for the rest of your life to try to manage that condition. Well, that medication costs money. So these companies are like, we would rather have a continuous revenue stream than actually solve the real underlying issue. Now, he says, while this proposition carries tremendous value for patients and society, it could represent a challenge for genome medicine developers looking for a sustained cash flow. So, look, basically, he's saying, hey, man, look, it's great for the people that are actually going to get helped by this, But what about our bottom line? This is bad for capitalism. Not good. In fact, look, if we can wipe out the diseases, well, then we're not going to get any money. I mean, we'll get some initial money from the cures, but then if they're gone, well, then that money's going to run out. That well's going to go dry, and we're going to have to figure out something else. In fact, he uses an example of this. This is Gilead Sciences treatment for hepatitis C. Now, that treatment achieved cure rates of more than 90%. Now, the company, as he points out, their sales for the hepatitis C treatments peaked at $12.5 billion in 2015, but unfortunately for them, had been falling ever since. Goldman estimates that the U.S. sales for the treatments will be less than $4 billion this year, according to a table presented in this report. Now I'm going to go to a quote here from Mr. Richter. He says, Gilead is a case in point where the success of its hepatitis C franchise has gradually exhausted the available pool of treatable patients. Again, I hate this. I hate everything about this. How they refer to this as a franchise. It's disgusting. It's gross. And look, oh man, we got to have a pool of treatable patients, or else we're not going to be able to make money. Now he says, in the case of infectious diseases such as hepatitis C, curing existing patients also decreases the number of carriers able to transmit the virus to new patients. Thus, the incident pool also declines. So he's looking at that as if it's a bad thing. Well, if we cure it more and if less people have it, there's less people that can carry it and transmit it to other people. That means less potential customers. Oh, we can't have that. We can't have that. Now, he points out, where an incident pool remains stable, cancer, the potential for a cure poses less risk to the sustainability of a franchise. Look, understand how gross this is. They consider curing people as a bad thing because, oh man, we gotta have a sustainable franchise. This is gross. Gross. But this is what happens when you have a country that is taken over by corporations. I mean, when you privatize healthcare and you privatize research and development for diseases, then you get companies that have a fiduciary responsibility to enrich their shareholders and CEOs that are less interested in solving problems and alleviating human suffering by making sure that they get that money for their shareholders by holding back progress. I mean, gene editing could be fantastic, could be great. All these new and exciting treatment options and cures that are right on the horizon. Wipe out a plethora of diseases. And what are these companies are doing? They're worrying about how that's going to impact their profit margins. This is a gross system. This is why profit margins shouldn't be a part of healthcare. Because, again, they will hold back progress in order for profit. So they can keep people on drugs that, look, might alleviate some of their symptoms. But if you've ever watched any of those drug commercials before that air all the time on corporate media, well, a lot of those have a ton of terrible side effects. It would be better to cure it. But again, that's looking at it from a human perspective. If you look at it from a corporate perspective, then, well, look, those side effects are acceptable for us because we're not experiencing those, and we have a steady revenue stream. Now, man, it's better for them to have customers than to be able to cure people. And look, you know what that means for innovation? It means they're going to be stuck. They're not going to innovate when it comes to cures. They're going to innovate whatever makes them the most money in the long run. It's not about cures. It's not about healthcare. It's not about helping people. It's all about profit. And that's why we got to get the profit motive out of healthcare. Sick. Okay. Oh, it's a gross story, man. As greed. Okay. I got another super chat here from Platypi. She says, the story is making me feel physically sick. Well, good news is if it's a chronic condition, well then there's always a pharmaceutical company out there that is more than willing to service you. Unfortunately. Ugh. Even saying that makes me feel gross. Okay, let's move on. Positive story. Let's go. All right. Now, the majority of officials inside the Democratic Party establishment continue to push radical centrism as a way to win elections. Of course, radical centrism being let's continuously chase the right wing in a vain appearance to appear centrist. Now, they will point to wins by people, for example, like Doug Jones and Connor Lamb, as a way to rebuff the progressive wing of the party and say, no. You don't understand. We have to run to the center. Look at all these victories we got by running to the center. Yeah, but they ignore all the progressive victories that we've also had in this election cycle. Places where Donald Trump won by sometimes double-digit margins, where a progressive picked up that seat. But let's ignore all those, right? But they do. They say, no, you don't understand. Most Americans, see, your guys are fringe, you progressives. Most America is in the center. They're in the middle. So we can't go too far left like that crazy Bernie Sanders guy and all the other people that have adopted these crazy leftist positions. I mean, look, Medicare for all, that is too pie in the sky. No, we're capitalists, and that's the way it is. Now, I'm going to show you that on progressive priorities, that could not be more wrong. In collaboration with Justice Democrats, according to an article in Vice, Data for Progress has released a new report making the case for a progressive Democratic Party. It is called Future of the Party Report. Now, Vice writes, at the heart of our analysis is a novel crossing of public opinion research with an analysis of actual roll call voting. The result is stark. On issues from racial justice to economic equality, Democratic primary voters are increasingly united around progressive policies, and those who represent them or aspire to would do well to act and vote accordingly. Now, unfortunately, we have a system of legalized bribery that prevents a lot of these politicians from doing so. Now, they continue. We analyzed the preferences of the Democratic base, finding increasing support of progressive politics rather than centrism. So immediately, they're like, okay, well, let's see. Are Democratic voters more centrist? And therefore, the politicians do represent them in their centrism? Or are they more progressive and their politicians don't represent them? Again, they found out that it is the latter, that they're massively progressive, and yet the congressmen do not reflect that value. Now, let me give one example here. The recent bank deregulation bill. I've talked about that. It was supported by Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, and, of course, Doug Jones of Alabama. Now, the Democratic base, how do they feel about bank deregulation? Well, it turns out the base wants more regulation on the banks, as well as additional action to take on income and wealth inequality. According to the 2016 American Voter Election Study, 92% of Democratic primary voters support more government regulation of the banks. 80% say the government should reduce inequality, and 86% say the government should guarantee health care. I didn't hear the word access in there, because that's the buzzword that all these so-called new progressive politicians are saying. Oh, no, we want to guarantee access to health care. You know what that means? That means staying in the for-profit system. Oh, no, we just want to guarantee that you have access to the health care. No. We want to hear you're going to guarantee health care, because that is what 86% of the American people, or not of the American people, sorry, of Democratic voters want. 60% of the American people want single-payer health care. Now, again, that's why Medicare for All has such big popularity, not just among Democrats, but among the American people, as I just mentioned. However, centrists, you hear from them all the time saying, oh, no, we can't do that. That's pie in the sky. That's too far left. No, it's too radical. I remember Hillary Clinton saying back in 2016 that single-payer healthcare will never, ever come to pass. Oh, I'm sure she's eating those words now. And you wonder why she wasn't 50 points ahead of Donald Trump. Now, of course, whenever progressives want to point out, hey, look, we have great policy. Our policies will help all Americans. Centrists tend to say, well, you guys are white Bernie bros. Bernie Sanders, that's terrible African-American voters. No, that's a continuous smear that is left over from 2016 that continues to get spread, that Bernie Sanders does terrible among African-American voters, and that all progressives are just white Bernie bros that aren't representative of the minority communities. Because minority communities, African Americans especially, well, they go for centrists. They're pragmatic. They're practical, which basically means centrist, milquetoast, and pro-corporate, which they're not. No. Democratic primary voters, especially progressives, are far to the left on racial justice and economic inequality, as I mentioned. Now, that includes a majority of progressives wanting to end private prisons. That is something that we're running on. How about ending mandatory sentences? That's also something that most progressives are on board. And ending the war on drugs in legalizing drugs. That is also something most American progressives are in favor of. Now, polling on these issues shows massive support among voters. Now, the thing is that the politicians, as I mentioned before, do not match up what the voters want. 76% of Democratic senators, for example, represent states where modeled support for a $15 minimum wage is greater than 55%. However, only 61% of those senators support a $15 minimum wage. Why is that not 100%? It should be. It should be. Now, how about Medicare for All? 67% of Democrats in the Senate represent states where modeled support for Medicare for All is greater than 55%. However, only 1/3 of Senate Democrats support Medicare for All. That's 33%. That is amazing, right? But no, you have all these politicians that are getting paid off by pharmaceutical companies, which is by far the largest donors to Congress on both sides, and of course, health insurance companies. Not only that, but despite the fact that 86% of Democratic senators represent states with 55% support for repealing the Hyde Amendment. So this is women's rights. There are no senators out there that have tried to move forward with a bill to repeal the Hyde Amendment. And again, the Hyde Amendment says that you cannot have any federal money that goes to funding abortions. Again, Republicans, conservatives will claim, oh, look at all this money from the government going to fund abortions. Planned Parenthood killing babies with our tax money. No, that's not true. That's not true. That's actually not what's happening. And there are no Democratic senators. They are so afraid of the pro-life movement that no senators have put forward any legislation to repeal the Hyde Amendment, despite 86% of Democratic senators representing states where that is majority support among Democratic voters. And then finally, this is the worst part. Despite the fact that every Democratic senator represents a state where support for regulating CO2 is 55% or greater. So every state where a Democratic senator is representing, you have a solid majority of voters that are like, let's do something about regulating CO2. We got to do something about climate change. Come on, we got to do something about climate change. Only 5 senators support transitioning to renewable energy by 2050. That's not an ambitious plan. That is a plan that we should already have in place. And you know what? You wonder why that is. You look at those numbers and they're stark, right? Well, it could be because our representatives no longer represent us anymore. It could be the fact that they represent their donors and not the people who elect them. I think we all know that that's exactly what's going on. That's why we actually need to replace these Democrats with uncorrupted progressives. And then those uncorrupted progressives can get money out of politics, uncorrupt the process, and not just be uncorrupted themselves, but defuck the process. Because right now, the system of money in politics is absolutely fucked. And can you imagine if that ever happens? And it will happen. We could have things like Medicare for all. We could have a living wage. We could have free education at public colleges. We could transition to a green energy environment. We could get rid of private prisons. We could have economic justice. We can have social justice. We can have racial justice. Look, the country, and especially Democratic voters, are ready for something other than the status quo. All you have to do is you have to get involved. You have to vote. And most importantly, you've got to vote in the primaries. Primaries are the most important elections that you can have because then you can decide what your party actually represents. Get involved and vote. Okay. One more story here. I want to get this out. Uh-oh. New York gubernatorial candidate Cynthia Nixon has a message for corporate Democrats. Your time is up. Now, speaking at a progressive training event in Washington, D.C., Nixon told the crowd, in which, of course, she was a surprise guest. She was not a slated speaker. She told a crowd that was obviously fired up, quote, "This year, thousands of us progressives all over America are running for office for the first time because we're realizing that if we want things to change, we'll need to step up and do it ourselves. This year, each of us has to do whatever we can to take our government back. If we want change, we have to do what we have always done. We have to go out ourselves, and we have to seize it. The time is up for corporate Democrats, for politicians who campaign as Democrats but govern as Republicans." And finally, she says, "It can't be just business as usual anymore. I know that our country can do better. We have to turn the system upside down." So look, that's powerful. That's a powerful speech. It's a powerful message. And it's one I absolutely love. And by the way, she took aim at this during that speech to, of course, the IDC and Governor Cuomo. Now, the IDC, if you're unfamiliar, they're the independent, or were the independent Democratic Conference. Now, they say they're independent, but there was nothing independent about them. In fact, they had caucused with the Republicans in order to stop any sort of progressive policy. Now, that actually benefited Andrew Cuomo. Now come on, wait a minute. Cuomo, I thought he was a progressive. I mean, he ran on progressive priorities and tried to do all these progressive things that ended up getting stopped by the IDC. But wait a minute, what does that have to do with Cuomo? Well, I'm going to explain that. But first, look, whenever something progressive would come up in the New York legislature, unfortunately, again, as I told you, the IDC, along with the Republicans, would end up blocking it. And then Cuomo would come out and say, what could I do? What could I do? The IDC and the Republicans. Guess I can't have real reform. Looks like we got to moderate. Now, of course, Nixon is a strong challenger, right? She's got a big name. She's got name recognition, even though that currently she's behind in the polling. But here comes now progressive Cuomo. Now, here's the thing. Now, look, he says, oh, no, I'm totally against the IDC. Boy, those Republicans and the IDC, I can't believe these Democrats would go rogue and stymie me for so many years. And I had nothing to do with it, by the way. Really. Well, let's see if that's true. Now, first, I want to go to some news that happened recently. For that, I go to the New York Times. Now, they described a closed-door gathering earlier this month where Cuomo decided to put an end to the IDC, to the end of the of infighting between New York Democrats. I'm going to bring unity together. I'm going to bring these two sides together, and we're going to stop that, and we're going to actually pass progressive priorities, right? In fact, he said in this meeting, according to two people who were in the room, for the good of the party, this has to stop. So he was able to get the leaders of the IDC to say, and the Democratic Party to, for one, dissolve the IDC and join back together. Now, of course, major party power brokers in New York, like, for example, Joe Crowley, attended this meeting where they finally united just days after passing a budget that where Republicans and the IDC essentially got what they want to stop progress. Now, of course, Cuomo claims that no, the IDC was the one foil that was stopping me from being more progressive. So, look, and I really want this endorsement by the Working Families Party. I mean, but I tried to pass progressive policy. The IDC and the Republicans, they got together. They stopped me in this unholy alliance, and I was very powerless to stop them. But wait, you just ended the IDC. You could have done that at any time. But you didn't. Look, I'm going to show you this is not true at all. Now, I'm going to go back to a Politico piece that was printed back in 2014. Now, according to multiple sources with deep knowledge of the IDC and Republican conference's dealings, confirm that the governor has not been a passive observer during the formation of the coalition. Politico has learned that Cuomo was deeply involved, they say, and absolutely encouraged the marriage that allowed Republicans to remain in leadership even after the election of a Democratic majority. Furthermore, they say the governor was a key player after the coalition launched, privately offering advice about tactics and messaging. But why? Wait a minute. Again, wasn't Cuomo supposed to be a progressive? I mean, after all, he's representing a very liberal state. Turns out, the governor's interest, say knowledgeable sources, was ensuring that Republicans had control over the agenda in the Senate so that he wouldn't be handing the power over to New York City Democrats. In fact, one source explained, the governor and top aide, Larry Schwartz, made it very clear that he wanted the IDC to work with the Republicans to run the Senate. Understand, he wanted the IDC to work with Republicans to control the Senate. Another recalled that there were many conversations between Schwartz, Cuomo, and Republican leaders, and the governor, during those conversations, had frequently expressed frustration with Democratic Senate leaders and complained that he couldn't work with them. These Democrats, I can't work with them. I'd rather work with you Republicans. Gross. This is the supposedly progressive governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. Now, look, this is super important now because both Cuomo and Nixon, they're trying to get the endorsement of the Working Families Party. Now, look, they backed Cuomo back in 2010, and again, because of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Now, Nixon, as I said, she wants that endorsement. Cuomo wants that endorsement. That's why you've suddenly seen super progressive Cuomo, whereas Nixon apparently has been progressive for quite some time. Now, on Nixon, Here's what she said about Cuomo taking corporate money. Quote, "We have too many corporate Democrats like Andrew Cuomo. It's hard for some Democrats to do right when they're getting millions and millions of dollars to do wrong." She also says, "The election of Donald Trump was a wake-up for progressives all across this country, but even before Trump, the establishment was rigging our economy and our government to benefit those on top." Now, let me give you an example of Andrew Cuomo and, his supposed progressivism, right? And actually how much money he's received from corporations to block good policy. Now, this is marijuana legalization, right? Now, look, the progressive position is let's legalize marijuana. Let's end the war on drugs. Let's end mass incarceration and legalize marijuana medically and recreationally because it is not more dangerous than any other drug. In fact, it's less dangerous. It's less dangerous than alcohol. Well, alcohol happens to be something that Andrew Cuomo is in favor of. In fact, Cuomo is opposing or has opposed marijuana for what do you call safety reasons. But, as I'm going to show you, it's not because of safety reasons. It's because of how much money he's received from big alcohol. Now, this was, for that I go to an article in 2017 from David Sirota, who wrote in the International Business Times. He said the industry is a major financial backer of Cuomo's political career. His election campaigns have drawn more than $900,000 from alcohol-linked donors, and according to data compiled by the National Institute on Money and State Politics, Cuomo's New York State Democratic Party has pulled in another $200,000 from such donors since 2010. So what did they get in response to this? Other than, of course, blocking marijuana legalization. The governor also had signed a bill creating special tax incentives for New York City alcohol producers. He's also held a series of public summits to tout the production and consumption of alcohol in his state and signed legislation that his office boasted would help, quote, expand recreational production of beer, wine, and cider in New York State. Not only that, but he had been pushing at the time of this article a bill to try to allow movie theaters to sell alcohol. Oh, but no, money has no impact at all on what a politician actually votes for and believes. Well, I'm sure Andrew Cuomo just loved alcohol so much before he got all that money from the alcohol industry. And hell, maybe he did. But look, that is a good example of how money in politics corrupts the system. And no matter how progressive you may tout yourself as, doesn't mean that you're progressive in practice. Andrew Cuomo is kind of like Obama, ran on a progressive platform, but then certainly was not progressive. All this stuff with the IDC, man, it shows that he cannot be trusted, that he is not a progressive champion. It's time that we actually have one. And Nixon, she is clearly more progressive. Unfortunately, she is going up against the New York machine. So, look, you want to talk about machine politics, you got all these big Democratic strongholds. Well, New York City's one of them. That is an enormous Democratic stronghold, and their machine politics are in play, and they definitely do not want a progressive to win. So they are very much on the side of Cuomo. Now, that would, of course, show why Nixon is behind in the polls right now. However, if progressives can get out there in New York, they could defeat him. And look, she's got the help of Zephyr Teachout, who ran a pretty good campaign against Cuomo last time. Now they're joining forces. And Cynthia Nixon, she's got that name recognition. She's got the money that she needs. So this is a potentially strong challenger to Cuomo. Now, finally, she said, quote, "If 2016 taught us anything, it's that Democrats can't give voters something to vote against. We have to give them something to vote for." And, of course, her platform, Medicare for all. legalization of recreational marijuana, living wage, things like that. Real progressive policies. So now we know who the real progressive is in the race. And I hope the Working Families Party can see that and can put their might behind the real progressive in the race. Okay. That's a lot of stories. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, for going around the nation with me today. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Please consider donating on Patreon, becoming a patron, patreon.com/QATNation. I want to thank everybody who took advantage of the super chat as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That goes to help the show. All right. Let's see. One more thing. I will not be live on Monday, so no live show on Monday. We'll be back on Tuesday, so just to let you guys know, get that out of the way. That's it. Have a great weekend. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, 218 Nation. We'll see you next week. You have a great weekend.